All right, hi everybody. Douglas V. Gibbs here, Daily Dose. Let's talk about the infrastructure bill, infrastructure, Constitution, all of that jazz. And one of the things I know that's in the infrastructure bill is a provision that to tell cities that they're not allowed to have single-family only zones. In other words, they want you to have to put up with apartment complexes or multifamily units, townhomes, anything like that, also in single-family housing zones. You can't have a single family only. There's all kinds of other stuff in the infrastructure bill. I'll go over it. And then I'm going to explain to you from a constitutional manner what's allowed, what isn't allowed. And the thing is, it says infrastructure bill. It calls itself an infrastructure bill, but less than 5% of it actually goes towards traditional road and infrastructure projects. That said, according to the 1817 veto of the bonus bill by James Madison, federal government doesn't have any constitutional authority even for roads and things like that. That's supposed to be up to each state. That's right, 1817 veto of the bonus bill by James Madison. Madison said that, hey, sorry guys, I'm not going to sign this bill for funding, federal funding of roads and boatways because there is no constitutional authority for it. They said, well, general welfare clause, and we're going to move military equipment on those roads. And Madison says, that still doesn't do it, and that's not what we meant by the general welfare clause. Then he explains what was meant by the general welfare clause. So even the interstate highway bill signed by Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, way back in the 50s, that also was unconstitutional. There's no authority for it. In addition to 5% for roads and infrastructure, the bill is designed to cut in on local government duties, trampling over areas that ought to be either only taken care of by local government or led by the private sector. Again, no constitutional authority. Federal government has no business getting involved in these things. And so let's go over some of the things that this bill is about. And this is a list of, I think it's 9 or 10 things here that the Heritage Foundation points out. And I'm going to go over each of them. So number one, dishonest advertising. Less than 5% of spending goes to roads and bridges. Once again, there's no constitutional authority for that anyway. Federal government doesn't have that authority. That's up to each state. States are supposed to take care of their own roads, their own bridges, their own stuff. Federal government has no authority to even be involved in any way, shape, or form spending money. Federal government was designed to handle external issues and disputes between the states and things that have to do with the unions, such as establishing post offices. They're not even supposed to maintain the post office. That's a different discussion for another time. So, so out of $2.25 trillion that this infrastructure bill wants to spend, between $90 billion and $100 billion, or less than 5%, is supposed to go towards traditional road and infrastructure projects. So, first of all, it's dishonest in what it's saying it's about. It's not about the infrastructure, number one. And number two, they don't have the constitutional authority for all those things anyway. Two, $2.75 trillion tax hike that was stunt post-pandemic economic recovery. The corporate income taxes can go from 21% to 28%. Now, the 16th Amendment technically allows this, according to some people. The Founding Fathers originally didn't want direct taxation, only indirect taxation. If there was going to be taxation regarding businesses, it was going to be import, export, and manufacturing. But a corporate tax or a direct tax on the people through wages, like income tax with the IRS, was never intended. Founding Fathers never intended that. But technically, 16th Amendment, and that's a long discussion, whether or not the 16th Amendment was properly ratified, whether or not it was even properly proposed. There is a theory that it shouldn't even been proposed. It was illegal. Same thing with 17th Amendment. I'll go over that in some other videos. Number three, big spending won't deliver promised job creation. It's not the federal government's job to create jobs. They can't create jobs. They create nothing. All government does is take. First of all. Second of all, what's going on with jobs inside the country, once again, is none of the federal government's business. Federal government is taxed with trade with other countries, protecting the trade routes, things like that, external things. But they're claiming that the plan will create millions of jobs. Infrastructure spending has a poor track record of increasing employment. Federally funded projects are slowed by red tape and often serve to divert skilled workers from private sector construction work to government jobs. Then they say, well, we created all these government jobs. First of all, unconstitutional jobs. And number two, that's not job creation. That's job diversion. And it's taken away from the private sector where production happens. So what it does is in the long run, it reduces production. So, and in the net effect is it'll be destroying jobs anyway, or at least in the private sector. All right. Number 4, federal takeover of local responsibilities. School construction, none of the federal government's business. That's a state and local community authority. $100 billion for water lines, none of the federal government's business. That's up to each state and their communities. $20 billion for pedestrian safety. The federal government thinks they have authority over pedestrian safety. Local community issue, maybe can be paid for by the state. None of the federal government's business constitutionally. And the problem is we've got people in the federal government that believe that if the federal government don't do something, it won't be done. It won't be done right or whatever. The federal government is your savior. No, the federal government is the problem. The federal government is what gets in the way. The Constitution was written to limit the federal government, to keep them out of our business. The First Amendment begins, Congress shall make no law. The whole thing is about keeping government out of local stuff, only handling the external stuff. Number 5, undercuts businesses by micromanaging economic development. Internal economic development is none of the federal government's business. No authority, no constitutional authority whatsoever. There's no place in the Constitution you can show me that the federal government has the authority to dictate anything regarding the private business sector. But yet they're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on things that are typically private initiatives or local initiatives, like research and development, broadband access, the electrical grid, housing development. And I told you when it comes to housing development, they're going to dictate, to single family neighborhoods that they're not allowed to have just single family homes, that you're going to have to put multifamily units in there, because we won't be more like the Soviet Union with all these stack them and pack them garbage. And it would socialize these activities on a massive scale, according to the Heritage Foundation. So we've got federal involvement in what would normally be private investment. Number 6, $700 billion in corporate welfare and tax credits. Now, while the stated top line goal of the spending plan is jobs, once again, none of the federal government's business. Welfare, that's up to each state if they want to have a safety net program. Green energy, up to the local communities, up to the private sector, none of the federal government's business. Politically selected manufacturing, you can pick winners. That's mercantilism. The founding fathers fought against that. And it's like Solyndra all over again, but on a larger scale. Number 7, over $400 billion in welfare and health spending. $400 billion proposed Medicaid expansion. We want to eventually get to health, Medicaid for all. Even Medicaid is unconstitutional. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a safety net or that there shouldn't be help for folks who need it. It's supposed to be at the state level. Each state is supposed to decide that and determine whether or not to have those programs. Federal government cannot constitutionally have those programs. They're all legal programs. And, of course, then you have to ask yourself, what does, Medicaid and things like that got to do with infrastructure? It's an infrastructure bill. But see, what they're doing is they're creating this big infrastructure bill, and then they're putting all of their, wish items into it. They're rubbing the Aladdin's lamp and hoping to get their wishes. All right. Number 8, wasteful $165 billion handout for transit and Amtrak. Well, first of all, they're trying to treat the whole United States like it's New York City. We don't all want subways or need subways. We're spread out in the rest of the country. Second of all, that's none of their business. That's up to the local business, the local jurisdictions. Local jurisdictions know what their communities need. Federal government doesn't have that authority or even understanding. Why do I want somebody in the far offices of Washington, D.C. to decide whether or not we get a train? It's none of their business. And the train program, by the way, in California has been, the speed rail has been a disaster. And there's absolutely no authority. The plan would spend nearly 50% more on trains and buses than on roads. Trains and buses and roads are none of the federal government's business. That's up to each state. States are supposed to handle these issues. All right, number 9, $1.74 billion in subsidies for electric vehicles. None of their business. That's up to the consumers to decide, the private industries, on whether or not we go electric, we stay gas, do a little bit of both. We're going to decide on how we buy things. And the industries will then adjust based on consumer decisions. That's how a free market system works. None of the federal government's business. They have no authority. But see, they want us out of our cars. They want us not to use gas. I don't care if they do electric stuff. See, that's a funny thing about people believe that it's okay to use gas-powered vehicles. We don't care if they do that. It's okay. We can all live in the same world. But the people who want to live in, only electric or whatever, that world, oh, well, you can't have gas. We're going to force you out of them. Well, isn't that kind of tyrannical? All right. But, they believe in the man-made climate change hoax, and that's a big part of the problem. So that's the 9 items that the Heritage Foundation put out, and so that's my comment on each of them. So basically what this is, central planning and federal micromanaging. That just doesn't work, and it's unconstitutional. A little bit of both. Doesn't work, unconstitutional, but they're trying to do it anyway. And there's a lot of other stuff in that bill you don't even want to know about. Like I was telling you earlier about the zoning. They're going to dictate to how a city can do their zoning and stuff like that. It's not none of the federal. This is a movement towards totalitarianism, national federal control over local issues and private issues. Private industry, local government supposed to take care of all stuff. None of the federal government's business. This thing needs to be defeated, needs to be stopped. It goes in a place. We got some serious problems. Thanks for watching. United We Stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America and God bless you. Don't forget, politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com. You want to be on my email list? politicalpistachio.com. On the right-hand side of the sidebar, there's a button just below the donate button where you can get on my email list. I'm glad I'm getting back to doing videos. I enjoy doing the videos. Keep coming back to this page. I'm also going to start doing some on my Constitution study page, which hasn't gotten any videos for quite a while. All of these videos also wind up on BitChute, bitchute.com/DouglasVGibbs. That way, if this one disappears, it won't there. And while I do have a Rumble page and Telegram and some of these other things, I'm still in the process of learning how to use them. So be on the lookout for me expanding in that manner. Going to my websites, politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com. That's a good way to keep track. And don't forget also, I've written 7 books and I'm working on ones right now. Any day now, man, these books I should have had done months ago, but I'm still working on them. I've got like 3 new books I'm trying to get out before the end of the summer. Be on the lookout for them. And of course, live Constitution classes in Southern California and online. Scott McKay's channel on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Pacific, Zoom through 1776 Forever Free. They Zoom a class I do in Carlsbad, California. And then, like I said, I got live classes in Orange County, San Diego County, and Riverside County. And with all of that, I thank you for watching the video. We'll see you next time. Stay constitutional.